Welcome to the Academic Writing Primer. This primer covers the conceptual and practical tools you'll need to develop your academic writing skills, and it shows you how academic writing differs from other styles of writing. It's aligned with the 7th edition of the APA manual, and it's divided into 2 parts called higher order concerns and lower order concerns. In academic writing, not every element has equal priority, and the most important parts of your writing are called higher order concerns, or HOCs. HOCs are the broad elements such as development, documentation, and organization. After you've addressed these important elements, you can turn your attention to lower order concerns, or LOCs, and these include grammar, mechanics, and usage. As you become a more experienced writer, it'll be important that you take the time to address both orders of concern. Let's begin with the concept of faith integration. Throughout your academic program at Bethel University, you'll be encouraged to integrate your faith in the learning process. Christian scholars who are working with theories and who are informed by Scripture do not force every fact or theory to fit into the Christian worldview. Rather, Christian faith integration involves testing secular knowledge claims and responding to the results. A metaphor for Christian faith integration is a touchstone, a stone that goldsmiths use to determine the purity of a sample of gold. For example, consider the passage in Romans 12:2. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Romans 12 reveals several parallels with transformative learning theory, and along with other passages, it reflects the interconnection between our cognitive, spiritual, emotional, and physical dimensions. For one person, the spiritual and emotional dimensions may be dominant and eclipse the cognitive and physical features of learning. And for another person, the cognitive and physical dimensions may have more influence and overshadow the spiritual and emotional dimensions. In either case, there are several assumptions behind the integration of faith and learning, including the assumptions that all truth is God's truth. There is no conflict between God's truth and other truth. Truth is the most important goal of learning, and secular learning is incomplete and often distorted. Christian integration is based on the skillful and accurate interpretation of the Bible, and integration of both Christian knowledge and secular knowledge is critical for the deepest learning to take place. The concepts of worldview and Christian worldview are relevant to the faith and learning discussion. A worldview is a set of beliefs that allow a person to find meaning in life experience and to process new information in a way that maintains a coherent picture of reality. A worldview involves values, beliefs, attitudes, assumptions, and biases that a person uses in decision-making and in evaluating new information and new experiences. What a person believes is real and unreal, possible and impossible, reasonable and unreasonable, true and untrue, is all part of each person's worldview. The Christian worldview provides a set of objective values against which academic knowledge claims can be measured, categorized, and understood. Christian scholars offer clarifying insight. They consider how a theory compares favorably or unfavorably to Christian truth, and they reflect on the moral and spiritual implications of a theory. In other words, the Christian interpretive worldview is like a ruler, not like an axe. In addition to integrating your faith, you'll be asked to engage in critical thinking throughout your academic program. Critical thinking means analytical and not harsh or disapproving. It's being able to conceptualize, apply, analyze, synthesize, and evaluate the information that your instructors present to you. And critical thinking from a Christian perspective involves forming a solid judgment that reconciles common sense and scientific evidence with biblical principles. What is essential to the success of Bethel's educational mission is a commitment to principles of academic honesty, which are keenly tied to integrating faith and thinking critically. The first principle is to take personal responsibility. Every member of the Bethel community is responsible for upholding the highest standards of honesty at all times. If you're unsure whether a particular action is appropriate, you can always talk to your instructor. The second principle is to understand the policy. Violating the principles and spirit of academic honesty can result in denial of credit or dismissal from Bethel. Penalties are given at the discretion of the faculty member, and offenders may be referred to the Dean of Academic Programs. If you're charged with a violation, you have the right to appeal any disciplinary action through the Office of Academic Affairs. And the third principle is to know exactly how to produce honest academic work. One of the best ways to avoid problems is to develop good time management skills, because this will help you avoid being tempted by dishonest shortcuts. You are being dishonest and plagiarizing anytime you claim or imply that the work someone else has done is really your own, whether you intended to or not, and anytime you get in the way of another student's research or studying. You are also being dishonest anytime you claim that your work is new and original when it is not. Let's look specifically at the actions that are considered academically dishonest. Academic dishonesty is any activity that interferes with the education, pursuit of knowledge, or fair evaluation of a student's performance. For example, cheating. That's using or attempting to use unauthorized assistance, material, or study aids in examinations or other academic work. An example of cheating is using a cheat sheet on a quiz or exam. Plagiarism is using the ideas, data, or language of another without specific and proper acknowledgement. Examples of plagiarism include distorting or misrepresenting another's work as your own and submitting it for an assignment, using someone else's ideas without attribution, failing to cite a reference or to use quotation marks where appropriate, or changing just a few words in a direct quote. Fabrication is submitting contrived or altered information, for example, making up data for an experiment, fudging data, citing non-existent resources, or padding a bibliography. Multiple submission is another dishonest activity. It means submitting without prior permission any work previously submitted to fulfill another academic requirement. In other words, submitting the same paper for two different classes. Misrepresentation of academic records. This is misrepresenting or tampering with any portion of a student's academic record, either before or after coming to Bethel. An example is entering an unauthorized change to a grade. Unfair advantage refers to attempting to gain unauthorized advantage over fellow students in an academic exercise. Examples of unfair advantage would be gaining unauthorized access to examination materials, either past or present, obstructing or interfering with another student's efforts in an academic exercise, misrepresenting the need for an absence or extension, continuing an exam beyond the prescribed time limit, and destroying, hiding, removing, or keeping academic resources. Digital offenses involve the unauthorized destruction, modification, or duplication of digital assets. These offenses include software piracy, hacking, constructing or utilizing viruses, knowingly introducing viruses into a system, copying programs and data belonging to others. And facilitation of academic dishonesty. This is the act of knowingly helping or attempting to help someone violate any provision of this code. For example, unauthorized working together on a take-home exam or other individual assignment, or sharing exam content with someone who has not yet taken the exam. Just as Christ acknowledges and honors the will of God in the work of the Holy Spirit, citing references acknowledges and honors the work of those who provide you with the opportunity to grow in knowledge and wisdom. APA style was developed by the American Psychological Association, and it's one of the most common methods of citing references. When you are incorporating the work of others, you must give credit to the sources you used, whether you directly quoted or paraphrased the information. APA citation provides the reader of your paper or project with the information needed to locate any of the sources you cited, and when citations are recorded in a standardized manner, they're easier to decipher. The reference list is a list of all sources cited in a research paper or project. It appears in a specific format at the end, and it should not be confused with a bibliography. A reference list includes the sources cited in the text. A bibliography lists all the sources consulted in preparing your paper or project, whether or not the work is cited in the text. The primer explains some of the basic rules for the references section and lists the most notable changes that were made to the 7th edition. If you are familiar with the 6th edition, your transition should be a smooth one. The primer provides some additional resources on APA style that you might want to explore. Keep in mind that while online databases and citation managers are helpful, they're often missing data or they are formatted incorrectly, and you will need to go back and edit them. There are examples in the primer of how to format a citation in the text and on your reference page. I focused on some of the most common sources that you will use during your academic program, like a book, a chapter in an edited book, a journal article with or without a DOI number, an organizational author, a dissertation or thesis, a religious work, and an abstract. Be sure to use APA format for your headings in your academic papers. This table in the primer shows you exactly how to format each level, so pay attention to things like when to center the heading, when to use bold font, when to use capital letters, and when to indent. Level 1 headings are used for top-level sections. Level 2 headings are subsections of Level 1, and so on. Each section of your paper starts with the highest level of heading. Don't begin a paper with an introduction heading, because the first paragraphs of a paper are understood to be introductory. Instructors may ask you to prepare an annotated bibliography, and unless they give you specific formatting instructions, you should follow the format and example that I have provided in the primer. Basically, an annotated bibliography is a student paper that contains reference list entries followed by short descriptions called annotations, and the annotations usually involve a summary, evaluation, or a reflection. Its purpose is usually preparation for a research project. Just collecting sources for a bibliography is useful. However, when you have to write annotations for each source, you begin to read more critically instead of just collecting information. At the professional level, annotated bibliographies allow you to see what has been addressed in the literature and where your own research or scholarship can fit. Also, extensive and scholarly annotated bibliographies are sometimes published to provide researchers with a comprehensive overview of important issues. You will find information about thesis statements in the primer. The kind of paper you are writing determines whether you should write an analytical, expository, or argumentative thesis statement. An analytical paper breaks down an issue or an idea into its component parts, evaluates the issue or idea, and presents this breakdown and evaluation to the reader. An expository paper explains something to the reader, and an argumentative paper makes a claim about a topic and justifies this claim with specific evidence. The claim could be a policy proposal, an evaluation, a cause and effect statement, or an interpretation. The goal of the argumentative paper is to convince the reader that the claim is true based on the evidence you provided. Make your thesis statement specific so that it covers only what you will discuss in your paper. Support it with specific evidence and place it at the end of the first paragraph of your paper. Your topic may change as you write, so you may need to revise your thesis statement to reflect exactly what you have written about in the paper. It's important that you know how to structure academic paragraphs. Think of them as a complete sandwich or burger with all the best ingredients. Each academic paragraph is at least 5 sentences long and contains a topic sentence, adequate development, coherence, and unity. A topic sentence is the first sentence that introduces the main idea of the paragraph. Adequate development requires 3 or 4 sentences of supporting details, such as facts, definitions, or examples. The closing sentence is the last sentence of the paragraph, and it either restates the main idea or introduces the next paragraph. Coherence involves logical bridges, which are sentences that are constructed in parallel form and that carry the same idea. Coherence also involves verbal bridges, which are synonymous, and transition words that link ideas. Unity means the entire paragraph has a single focus, so you should start a new paragraph when you want to present a new idea, contrast different points, break up complex paragraphs that are too long, and when you are ending your introduction or starting your conclusion. You will be successful in turning in a quality paper if you spend time in each stage of the writing process. These 3 stages include the pre-writing stage, the drafting stage, and the revising stage. If you skip the pre-writing stage and don't read critically or organize your ideas, if you don't write strong academic paragraphs and cite your sources, or if you don't leave yourself enough time to read for higher order and lower order concerns and make the necessary changes, you run the risk of taking shortcuts, and this can lead to academic dishonesty. So it's important that you spend adequate time in each of the 3 writing stages. The 3 parts of an application essay include the introduction, body, and conclusion. The introductory paragraph introduces the topic, its significance to the reader, and identifies the 2 opposing views. Your thesis statement is the last sentence in the introduction. The body of the essay includes paragraph blocks that cohesively develop each of your main points, and the conclusion summarizes the main ideas with a statement of your position. Please be careful that you don't introduce any new information in your concluding paragraph. When you write an academic paper based on the work of others, you will need to understand the differences between a quotation, summary, paraphrase, and synthesis. A quotation contains the exact words from a source passage presented in quotation marks. A summary is a relatively brief and objective account, in your own words, of the main ideas in a longer detailed passage. A paraphrase is a restatement, in your own words, of a passage, and its overall structure reflects the structure of the source passage. A paraphrase is sometimes the same length as the source passage, and sometimes it's shorter. Keep in mind, though, that only an occasional word and not whole phrases from the original source appears in the paraphrase, and that the sentence structure does not reflect that of the source. Synthesis is the integration of quoted, summarized, or paraphrased source material with your own ideas to create something new. It's not enough to just string together source material. As an academic writer at the college level, you must explain, discuss, criticize, and interpret source material. That is, you should build on the work and ideas of others, not rely on it. This is synthesis, bringing your ideas together with the ideas of others to create something new. Whether you quote, summarize, or paraphrase a source passage, you must cite your source. Synthesis is an integration of ideas from many sources, and it's not the same as a summary, comparison, or review of one source. The two types of syntheses include explanatory synthesis and argumentative synthesis. Explanatory synthesis brings sources together to explain a perspective and the reasoning behind it, whereas argumentative synthesis brings sources together to make an argument. In both types, the researcher identifies relationships between sources and draws conclusions. Learning how to synthesize sources is a critical skill in academic research writing, and it's the most difficult writing skill for some, and the key features include accurately and objectively representing information from multiple sources, clearly organizing the information so readers can immediately see the connections between sources, such as advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons, or agreement and disagreement, making sense of the sources and helping the reader understand them in greater depth, drawing on multiple sources to reach a broader conclusion about a research topic, and providing a new insight or different perspective on the research topic. The Academic Writing Primer explains how to critique a website. When you're writing an academic paper and deciding whether to include content from a website, web page, or web document, you'll need to know how to judge its credibility. One way to do this is to make sure the content meets 5 criteria in the areas of accuracy, authority, objectivity, currency, and coverage. If you cannot find adequate answers to the questions I've listed for each area, I recommend that you find the information elsewhere, like in a scholarly journal article. Sometimes students will sit down to write an academic paper and they realize they have what we call writer's block. If you're struggling with writer's block, sometimes it's because you are trying to use both the creative and the critical areas of your brain simultaneously. Remember that critical means analytical and not harsh or disapproving. Being creative and critical are two very different thought processes. The creative arises from the right brain and the critical from the left brain, and they are most effective when you use them for different tasks. In the primer, I have explained how you can break down the process into 6 steps and overcome writer's block. Notice the idea is to alternate between the creative and critical thought processes. First do something creative, and then complement that process with something critical. If you're still having problems, I've provided some other strategies you can try. For example, try walking away, writing or reading something else, asking yourself questions and answering them, or writing at an unusual time. Try exercising first, asking for help, breaking it down, or beginning in the middle. You could also try talking out the paper, recording the paper, changing the audience, or playing a role. If you think any of these strategies may be helpful, you can find details about them in the primer. During this presentation, you learned about the most important parts of your writing called higher order concerns, or HOCs. They include the broad elements such as development, documentation, and organization. After you've addressed these important elements, you can turn your attention to lower order concerns like grammar, usage, and mechanics. You may want to use the Evaluating Academic Content page in the primer as a checklist. If you address each item on this list of criteria, I'm confident that you will have written an excellent academic paper.